edition of Twacktalk. This week we head to the Pacific Northwest where we're going to be discussing the band Soundgarden. How's it going, guys?
Going good.
Doing well.
Yeah.
I'm pumped.
I'm Ryan.
And you guys know me as D. Forgive me, I'm kind of helming. This is my first episode that I'm kind of helming here. So we're going to start out. A lot of people don't know this, is that when Soundgarden started out, they were a three-piece. Did you guys know that?
Did not.
Did not.
Okay. Because it was Kim Thayil on guitar, Hiro Yamamoto on bass, and Chris Cornell was the drummer. They didn't even really have a singer at first. It was just like the three of them. And from what I gathered from the interview documentary was that they were just like instrumentalists, just kind of like working on a project. And one day, one of the guys didn't show up, I guess, like to sing. So Chris had like written lyrics down. And then he got up one day on the microphone and that was it. So they had to get another drummer. So yeah, that was a lot of people don't know that it started out as like a three-piece, and then he was the drummer.
It kind of sounds like Genesis after Peter Gabriel left.
Mm-hmm.
We need a singer. Wait, hold on. Phil's over there on drums. How about he just do it?
Well, the thing is, it's like the guy over in Mastodon. He sings and he plays drums, and I've like attempted drums. And I don't even think like my brain could even like do singing and drums, let alone drums. It's
Drummers are wired different.
Just not happening. So yeah, that's an amazing feat if you can do it.
Well, if you think about it, what's his name with Foo Fighters did the same thing. Like he went from behind drums to then going.
Well,
he was originally a guitarist, but I mean, he went and played drums for Nirvana, and then Dave Grohl. That's who I'm trying to think of.
And then he did all the instruments.
That's his own episode. Dave Grohl will probably get his own episode. I mean, that guy's like a machine. He is a machine.
Well, that's kind of the same problem that Smashing Pumpkins has, is that the lead singer pretty much plays everything when they do the studio albums, which causes some irritation with the rest of the band, supposedly. But anywho, but we're not here talking about them. We don't care. That's not relevant.
That was so. Anyway, you guys. I guess I'll start with my first experience with Soundgarden. So. I kind of became aware somewhat of Soundgarden. It was around, I would say like 90, 91. I remember seeing like a video for, I think it was Rusty Cage or Jesus Christ Pose, but it was sort of like, it just kind of like flew by me on the highway. You know what I mean? It was just like, well, what was that? And I didn't really remember. And then my next memory was like Outshine. But I mean, yeah, a lot of the stuff though, the majority of the stuff of Soundgarden, I'm always kind of like late to the party. So when I show up, I have to play catch up so that I can like get the entire experience. And but yeah, I do definitely remember like his voice definitely and with the Temple of the Dog stuff, because it was kind of like it kind of felt like he was kind of, they were kind of coming at you like it was like rapid fire at that time. It's like, oh wait, it's Soundgarden, but he's in Temple of the Dog, and and there's this thing called singles. It was just like a lot all at once,
The grunge scene dropped on everybody quickly.
Yeah.
It really did.
Once Nirvana broke that dam, it was. And the funny thing is, like, Nirvana really wasn't like, yeah, they're one of the big four of the grunge scene, but when you really think about it, they were kind of there, but all the other three plus Stone Temple Pilots were really the ones driving a lot of the grunge thing. That Nirvana really felt like kind of went off on a Beatles-esque kind of weirdness compared to the others who kind of stayed in their lanes. Kind of leading into that, the funny thing is, I don't know if you guys remember, like, where you'd get the like Columbia House or BMG music disc, and you get like the okay, here's your intro thing of 10 CDs,
like a penny.
Well, yeah. So and then they bill you like $40 like down as they're trying to clear out their old loot. But one of the sets I ended up getting Bad Motorfinger, Soundgarden's Bad Motorfinger, Pearl Jam's 10, Stone Temple Pilots Core. At the time I was raging against Nirvana, so I was like, they're crap. Which, talking about coming late to the thing, I always kind of rebel against whatever's popular and then jump on the bandwagon way after the fact. Go, okay, there's some cool stuff here. But Soundgarden was one out of that group that I locked onto. I think a lot of it had to do with coming from the heavy metal zone, that they were probably the heavy metalist of the group that was coming out of Seattle. That with that, they had that kind of heavy guitar riff, the heavy bass riff. And for me, I mean, you're pretty much that whole album I wore out. I think even to this day, the copy of it I have, the disc has like scratches all the way around it, and it's surprising that thing still plays when I throw it into a CD player.
Come on, Bad Motorfinger.
Pardon? Yeah, Bad Motorfinger. Yeah. Yep.
Just a little trivia piece. The very first CD that I ever got was Nirvana's Nevermind. And that was after Nirvana had broken through with the Smells Like Teen Spirit. I was kind of a slow person to come on board for Soundgarden. I remember seeing a video on Headbangers Ball for Loud Love way on back when. This is before grunge really hit, and it didn't really do anything for me, but I do know it stood out a little bit, simply because it was somebody different, somebody to keep an eye on. I ended up never purchasing any of Soundgarden's catalog. I never did own any of it.
Sinner.
I know. It's so readily available. Once it really became mainstream, it was just all over the place. So I almost felt like I didn't have a need to fill in the cracks with what I did know of them. That's actually something where this episode forced me to go back and listen. I've actually listened to the entire catalog front to back and sequentially, and I've actually found that there is a lot in there that maybe I should have picked up on back in the day.
It's funny you bring up listening to the catalog, and it really feels like there's three different groupings of albums. You have the first two, what is it? Louder Than Love and Ultra Mega, something like that.
No, negative. Stand by. I got it.
They had a couple of EPs, Screaming Life.
Three EPs, yes, FOP and Screaming Life. So what they usually do is they usually combine those on like one collection, so it looks more like an album and not like an EP. So that's why they call it FOP and Screaming Life. That's where Hunted Down and Nothing to Say, which will be featured on the Ant Wacky Soundgarden playlist, which I will include in the comment section after this show is published and on our social media, so that you guys can see some of the stuff that we liked if you are interested in checking that out. So yeah.
Well, either way, what I was saying was that there's those early ones. You then get to Bad Motorfinger, and Bad Motorfinger is Super Unknown, and then Brain, I'm not as good with album names, Down on the Upside have a sound. Now, admittedly, then you have the last grouping, which is King Animal, which you have that huge gap where Cornell went solo and did
Audio Slave.
Audio Slave. with the Rage Against the Machine guys. So you end up with like a different sound to that, but having those gaps, and the early stuff feels like raw.
Mhm.
I think you can feel the transition from like the Black Sabbath kind of influenced metal,
Yeah.
early 80s metal to the grunge. It's not quite there yet. And then with Bad Motorfinger, they find their rhythm, their sound.
You know,
And I think their lyrics mature.
well,
Yes.
I think a big thing with Bad Motorfinger, particularly that was like really showed itself, was that I saw like one time in an interview, I really like Kim Thile's approach to guitar playing, because he was saying that when they were coming up, particularly on the LA scene, everything was very flashy and, you know, got to pick everything clean. And he wanted to make as many interesting noises as he could with his guitar as possible. So that's just kind of like was their approach with like Soundgarden. Like they were like just going to create with all these different colors, you know, the three of them, like when they were starting out, and they kind of took that work ethic going forward when they were started actually like making the music and stuff. So I always thought that a lot of their sound had that you can hear stuff of like Led Zeppelin.
Yes. That's
Black,
something I picked up on.
especially in Cornell's voice. Some Masters of Reality era Black Sabbath was also, you can hear that. They do an actual cover of Into the Void.
Yeah.
Yeah, just a lot. It had like this dark psychedelia about it too.
Yeah. There's since I was starting off with, you know, the original EPs from the late 80s and working my way album to album, the early stuff, definitely a lot of Black Sabbath, a lot of Led Zeppelin. There's even a little bit of Who in there that I picked up on, a little bit of Deep Purple. And you can tell that was what influenced them.
Yeah, so musically. Black Sabbath I picked out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it kind of had a little bit of a if you can visualize what I mean when I say a bit of a college band sound. It was raw and kind of punkish a little bit at the same time.
Yeah.
Well, that's where I say I think the lyrics are, if you look at their earlier stuff, the lyrics are less refined and less mature. There's, and I mean, you can see that with many bands, but you take something where like Pearl Jam came out and their stuff was refined by the time they came out. Now, the part you're missing is while most of the band members of Pearl Jam were running around with Mother Love Bone prior to that. So you have that continuity that they're in. I went back and actually listened to Mother Love Bone stuff because I never really had listened to it. And that immaturity in the lyrics, that immaturity in the music is there. That growing space of them developing into what then becomes that refined album of 10 shows up out there. So, you know, it's one of those things that I think with them, we actually have the history in the music because we can listen to the albums and if you listen to it sequentially, you can actually see it. I actually even listened to Audio Slave in there to see the transition through that, to see where Rage Against the Machine members ended up affecting how Cornell wrote the songs and edited it and everything else. So this was definitely a fun experience for me, kind of going through it. So
I can remember, like for instance, you're talking about like a lot of Soundgarden's music. One of the tracks I remember, like I listened to, and was called "Slaves and Bulldozers" from Outshine, because his voice kind of goes someplace else. Like it. I mean, he really. I remember I was at a friend's house and I heard him do that, and like at that time, Spoon Man was out, you know, and I had no idea about Slaves and Bulldozers, and I was like, wow, this is the same guy that can do this. I mean, I was just like, holy crap, So that's when I was really got onto the, okay, now I want to learn as much about this band as possible.
Yeah. I think Bad Motorfinger is probably the first album where he kind of found his sound. Because the prior album, Louder Than Love, it was sporadic. There was a lot of raw screaming type vocals, and you didn't really get that feel for Chris Cornell yet. But there were a couple instances where it seemed like he was finding his way.
Yeah.
See, and the funny thing is, I think that's also where Kim Thiel ended up finding his sound too. That you had mentioned D earlier, the guitar playing and conceptually the discordant chords that they would play, and I think that is one of the original problems that Soundgarden probably had with Bad Motorfinger, getting out beyond people probably like us who were attracted to the metal aspect of it. That when you compare them, that album to 10 or Nevermind or even Core, those other albums kind of took off quickly. Bad Motorfinger didn't. It was actually Super Unknown which catapulted them major into the face of everything, even though they were there and they were the sound. And that discordant kind of chords that they were playing were I think it was distracting to a lot of people in relation to it and off-putting. But at the same token, that refined and developed and changed as they continued recording, and instead of it being a discord, it became kind of the flow. And I don't think somewhere in late Bad Motorfinger into Super Unknown you really kind of see that transition. So there's like I think the biggest thing for me in relation to Soundgarden is it's one of those bands that I choose to sit down and listen to, and I'm not really going and hunting and pecking for the good songs. I'm just kind of listening to the albums as a whole, or listening to the collection as a whole. And I might skip a song here or there, but it's more like like the Who's Tommy or something like that, where you're just kind of listening to the whole thing, and there's going to be highs and lows, and you're almost like an operatic piece, where you listen to the bits and pieces to mesh the whole story together. And that's kind of how I look at Soundgarden. Like if I'm listening to Pearl Jam, I'm going to be hitting up specific songs. I think 10 is a good album, but I really, most of the time, if I'm going to be going for specific things. Stone Temple Pilots, I'm looking for specific things. Soundgarden, I kind of don't do that. My listening tactic or disposition towards the band is different than it is with any of the others really that are out there.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead, man. I'm sorry.
I was going to say, Ryan, in your case, do you perhaps feel that they were over commercialized and that's why you're going through the whole album, or do you think it might be maybe because the other material is more in line with their hits?
The only album I think that was over commercialized was Super Unknown. I would put Super Unknown in that same kind of zone with Metallica of the Black Album. That all of a sudden you have this album that blows up and is in everybody's face. And probably the thing about it that I still like Super Unknown. I still like the Metallica's Black Album. Yeah. There are other albums that blow up like that I don't gravitate towards. I think Super Unknown is the most polished. And they did have a different producer for that album. So what do you got?
My question to you guys is, do you guys have a standout track song? Like somebody says Soundgarden to you, what would be the first song that you spring on them?
Well, that's a quick answer for me. Well, everyone knows the big hits, the Spoon Man, and it's Burden in My Hand. Burden in My Hand is the one that really caught me because it was later. It was off of Down on the Upside, but it was a combination of the video, but it seemed to be a more straightforward rock song.
If I were going to tell somebody, probably two ends to that question. If you're asking what is a song that I would tell somebody to go listen to if I were telling them this is Soundgarden, try and lure them into listening to it, my answer would be Fell on Black Days.
Yeah.
If it is what is the one that I'm going to go listen to, it's probably going to be Rusty Cage. For whatever reason that track hits, but both of them are just, and it's a theme that goes through a lot of Chris Cornell's writing, not just Soundgarden, but Audioslave and even his solo stuff. Dude was carrying some serious depression, mental components that he was dragging around with him. And the worst part is those are two songs that clearly identify that it's out there as part of his cross that he's bearing. What about for you, D?
Well, I had like two. I mentioned like one of them earlier, the Slaves and Bulldozers. But like, if I had to like really though like pick one, like say somebody like nobody, like I would want to take something probably from their most successful period, but it would definitely be a deep cut. So I'm going to go with Super Unknown, the title track from the album Super Unknown, because the whole song, like to me, like has like everything, because it sounds, because here's the backstory to this. Back in the day, I got a Soundgarden t-shirt and it had like this glow in the dark, like neon roller coaster artwork on it. And it was like the Super Unknown or whatever. And just the energy of the song and Chris Cornell's voice reminds me of like a Robert Plant in the era of Led Zeppelin, that soaring, taking flight kind of a vocal that he's really good at. And I think it really perfectly encapsulated the energy and awesomeness of Soundgarden. So yeah.
I think Hunger Strike, Temple of the Dog. I kind of think that's really where I paid attention to Chris Cornell from, because even though Eddie Vedder was in that, and I was like, oh look, it's the guy in Pearl Jam. It was the other guy that at the time was not a household name, Chris Cornell, and I felt he kind of ran away with that song.
Which is funny because it was actually Chris Cornell's thing. Vedder was just kind of sitting in it. Like I'm not even sure he even knew Andrew Wood from Mother Love Bone that they were doing the tribute to. So yeah, it's kind of funny on that everybody associates it with Vedder. Temple of the Dog was something I could never could get into.
Say Hello to Heaven, like the first track. When I heard that song, it was like I didn't even like think about Hunger Strike, because Chris Cornell completely, like, that's another song like he wrote and just completely like kicked ass on.
Speaking of songs that kick ass, Kickstand. I remember playing Road Rash. Do you guys remember Road Rash, the motorcycle game? Oh yeah. So one of the versions, I think it might have been a 3DO version, had actual Soundgarden's Kickstand as one of the songs on there. Mm-hmm. And that I don't know why, but I always did really good when that came on as the background music for that level. But
yeah, I remember I had the I think I actually had like another shirt of theirs. It was the kickstand thing. It was supposed to be in the style of like one of those skater shirts. I think of back in the day.
so, question for you guys: Did you dig into like the lyrical component of it, like go beyond? Because one of the things that there were a couple themes that I noticed that occurred. It started out with almost not necessarily anti-religion, but mockery of religion. Um, I had to go back and look at it for on Ultra Mega. It was 665 and 667, and both of them are
Yeah. I know what you're talking about.
satires of the Satanic Panic,
Yeah.
which is funny because I was literally talking to somebody the other day just about the Satanic Panic, as having lived through that and had to deal with people.
I believe if I'm not mistaken, that was something that Hiro Yamamoto, when he was in the band, thought it would be funny to do to people.
Well,
But
even after he left the band,
I might be wrong on that. So gatekeepers, any like shit I get wrong, you can always email your complaints and put Ryan and Pump in the subject line to
put it in the comments down below. Yes.
gmail.com. Thank you.
Yeah. Just put it in the comments down below. We'll take care of it there.
I don't think it's so much the lyrics that I was listening to. I mean, me always trying to pick up on guitar. I was actually listening to Kim Thale's progression from where he went. But by the time they were really getting to Super Unknown, he'd become a lot more experimental. It seemed like he had slowed down a lot, and he was kind of picking and choosing his parts rather than trying to hit us over the head with guitar like the earlier albums really did.
Do you think the music scene? So you look at Nevermind as kind of that breaking point from like glam metal, which is what they were rebelling against. Which actually a funny song in there, "Big Dumb Sex" on "Louder Than Love," is 100% making fun of the glam metal sex raunchy cliches, which is hilarious to me. Now that I listen to it, I'm like, oh my god, that's so funny. But there you have that kind of glam metal late 80s Poison, Whitesnake, those kind of things, and then you end up rolling into the grunge, which breaks with Nirvana, and then you have after that kind of a pushback of cleaned up music after the grunge movement. And as part of, do you think that's part of Thiel's change in music is actually like the evolution of that as he started seeing the scene change, or as the influences grew beyond just what the Seattle sound was, and expanded? Because I mean, at that point in time, they were big enough that they were being exposed to other artists. I mean, you can see the change in Cornell's stuff over time as well.
Well, I was also gonna I'm also like putting this little part in the article I'm drafting on Chris Cornell right now, but there is a thing where it's like I watched an interview with Alan Moore, of all people, the writer, saying that rock music has really only had like 3 revolutions. The first was Elvis and the Beatles. And the second was Woodstock '69. And then the third was when Nirvana came along. Because really, and that's like a huge gap if we think about it, because the music industry, after the hippie thing got shut down, pretty much was doing the same model, for so long. And then like when when the big four from the Pacific Northwest showed up, like it completely like challenged people as far as like what makes a musician. Like, hey, you know, musicians can be creative. You know, we're not going to be doing the standard, you know, standard formula you've been doing for 20 years now of like what the LA scene was doing. So,
yeah, I in some ways I don't know if I necessarily agree with them because what about the British invasion? I mean, what about the Kinks, the Stones? I mean, the Stones brought over, and I guess he might loop Stones in with Woodstock, but I mean, that was a change in relation to music on that. He's discounting disco. I mean, whether or not you like disco or not, that had a significant change. And I mean, you can call it club music, but that's rock music. What about the indie groups that were coming out of, you know, you take REM or B-52s?
yeah, and this is where it could like you get kind of dicey because it's like, well, okay, well now you're saying this one's rock and this one's not rock, sir. I'm offended that you made that comment, sir. This is lame. No, you don't know what you're talking about.
Well, and normally like Alan Moore, even though he's a very weird dude, I do give him credit on a lot of things that he ends up saying that are accurate, or have a perception of right. I think in this particular instance, he's really coalesced on things that he's identified and narrowed it down without looking at it much broader, because I mean, you can't discount some of these other bands and their effects on what occurred and say that a revolution didn't occur, because I would say Talking Heads even being around and being able to make money is revolutionary in a way. Any of the punk bands that came out, are you just tossing the Clash to the side? I mean, that Soundgarden wouldn't have been around. Nirvana wouldn't have been around if not for the Clash, if not for the Who, if not for a lot of these other bands that laid the groundwork. And I think the only thing that made the grunge scene a revolution is because they figured out how to make the indie scene profitable. And I think that's an indication of the corporate world, not the music world. The music scene, no matter where you go, be it Nashville, LA, New York, the music scene is existing, and small. It being found is something for record producers and record companies. These guys were playing to shows. They were filling audiences even before any of us knew anything about them. And so, if you look at it, the revolution is only because we have experienced it, not because they haven't been doing this. So I mean, I think there's more contextually there. And to be honest, I'm probably talking out my ass on stuff that I really don't know enough about. But it seems like a lot of fluff to me to say that, okay, well, it's this narrow thing. And it's like, yeah, I don't know.
I wasn't saying that I like agree with what he said. I just thought it was interesting, and it just kind of was making me think. I'm sure there's like a lot of things that should be included because there's so many great bands out there. One of the bands I noticed that we didn't even talk about, we even mentioned STP at one point. A lot of the sound, particularly the sound of that era, was both pioneered and innovated by, and I'll argue and say that this band is still innovative to this day, and that's the Melvins. They were very instrumental as far as like, very influential as far as like this whole scene with Soundgarden, Nirvana, etc. But Soundgarden, man, I think the thing is like, I think they probably realized that after the success of Super Unknown and then Blow Up the Outside World, it was like, how much higher do you want to go? I mean, because Because at that point they were like almost at the. I mean, you could definitely tell like they had reached that status. And I thought I wasn't surprised when they called it quits that first time.
Yeah.
I think a lot of it had to do with drugs, for one. I mean, I don't think they're, with the exception of maybe Pearl Jam, and even them, I don't know enough internally, externally, but it seems like almost every single one of those bands had drug issues deeply ingrained in there. You look at Cobain, you look at what's his name, Alice in Chains, you look at Stone Temple Pilots, you look at Cornell. I mean, Cornell admittedly had a drug issue. I think the drummer and I think the guitarist for Soundgarden also had drug issues, if I read correctly. So I mean, it was all pervasive within that, and then I do believe that Cornell was focused solely on the music, so invested in it, because he didn't stop. He kept writing and doing solo stuff. He then turned right around and did Audio Slave when he found other people that he wanted to record with. He then went back to Soundgarden. He continued playing live music. So that indicates to me somebody who is wrapped up in enjoying the music. I compare it to the Traveling Wilburys. When Traveling Wilburys got together and you had Tom Petty and George Harrison, and you just had this group of guys that were all sitting there just enjoying making the music and doing it, and they're like, man, we should do this as a thing. That's kind of how I see Chris Cornell. And you look at it with him trying to collaborate with people and do those kind of things. That's kind of a telling thing of somebody who wants to do popular stuff and somebody who just wants to make music. And that's where I kind of, even though I'm not a fan of their later work, that's where I give actual props to Pearl Jam, is they're putting out music that they want to do. It may not be overwhelmingly mainstream. It's not something that's necessarily going to sell them, which, I mean, I haven't bought an album of theirs in forever, but they're still doing it. They're still doing what they want to do. So
I want to, I kind of want to bring up something that it actually occurred to me while we were recording here. Was it so much grunge that was changing the industry, or was it just a complete shift for the entire industry, regardless of whether it was rock music or something else? I want to bring up a couple things. It was around that time that Pretty Hate Machine, 9 Inch Nails, that came out in 1989, but it was Head Like a Hole really started getting in rotation right around that time. And here's another one. Beastie Boys, Check Your Head, a complete departure from anything that they had done. And that's coming out in 1992. It was psychedelic, not really so much rap. It was experimental.
Was that 92? I thought that was earlier than that.
I think it's 92. It's 92. You got to check me.
I am.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm thinking of License to Ill.
Yeah. Yeah, but
License to Ill came out in 86.
Yeah. And then Paul's Boutique was 89, I think. But just look at how other genres of music, look at how they changed right around the same time. You go from your clean rap to heavier, darker rap.
Well, in part of that is
darker rap.
Dark rap. We've just created a new genre, dark hip hop. You look at like the glam rock, and I go back to brain's failing me. The Big Dumb Sex song. The mockery, the same mockery that occurred to end disco, was the mockery that was coming around to end the glam rock of the late 80s.
Yeah.
And I'm sure from a record production level, like, yeah, they were probably making money, but they were looking for new ways to make more money off cheap. And this kind of counter music culture movement, which was hitting hard in Seattle, was a mine of cheap money for them to make. And I hate breaking it down to like corporate need, but at that time, I mean, to get anything on the radio, you needed corporate backing. You either needed to be unbelievably like hitting so hard by yourself, which I think there's like one artist I can think of that did that, but otherwise you have to have that corporate backing. You have to have them to get you on the radio stations. You have to get that radio play or to get on MTV to be able to make the video. Where that situation has kind of changed. I mean, it's changed a lot. I mean, you listen to
it's more of a hustle now. If it wasn't before, it's more of a hustle now.
Yeah.
Well, and it's all down to a song. Can you get a song that gets you on the radio that then
how many streams do you get and blah blah blah.
That's why I almost still buy albums, because I want to hear what isn't getting radio play. I want to hear what is else out there that maybe the gem in the rough that I enjoy versus somebody else. Those kind of things aren't really appreciated, and you do see it with people who are into the record movement, the LPs, that they go out and buy the records and they have the old record player and everything else, because it forces you to listen through. You can't just skip a song, or you're listening to this album, that's what you're listening to. And maybe that's something we've lost in appreciation. And I go back to my earlier statement about just listening to Soundgarden. It's not something that I go cherry picking for songs. When I do go through a phase of listening to it, I'm listening to the whole collection and just kind of rolling through it and eating it up. Now, admittedly, I add Audio Slave in there as well, because even though it's not Soundgarden, it feels like it's in the same vein due to Cornell. But
as far as like Chris Cornell, I wanted to mention this because I think his best album, like as far as like his solo material, was Euphoria Morning, which I believe came out in 2000. I could be wrong on that, but that was his first solo album. I thought it was really good. Kind of reminded me a lot of Jeff Buckley. If people are familiar with the Grace record, they'll know what I'm talking about. He actually wrote a song about Jeff Buckley after he learned about his passing called Sweet Euphoria. So, yeah, I would recommend that one. But a lot of people don't know that I got the news of Chris Cornell's passing when I was driving home from work one morning, when I was still working third shift, and turned on, because I live in the greater Detroit area, and I turned on the local radio, and the disc jockey was like, yes, Chris Cornell was found dead last night in a hotel room in Detroit. And I was thinking like, oh man, I really hope there's no foul play. Detroit does not need this. We do not need an even further black eye. And then of course, like when the circumstances came out of like what actually happened, it was just like really sad, you know what I mean? That it had to happen in Detroit, you know? I mean, it was a sad period, but you know what I mean? It was just like,
it's right on your doorstep. Yeah.
Yeah.
I wondered how that actually kind of played in for you.
Yeah. So it was sort of like, man, that sucks, you know? So, but yeah, like, I really think that as far as like that era of music, he was probably like one of the best vocalists that have come out of that whole class of musicians.
I think one of the better songwriters too.
Yeah.
I don't. If you actually start breaking down the lyrics, I don't think he gets enough credit for the lyrics, and a lot of it is not necessarily the popular songs, like Spoon Man. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry, like it's a fun song, but it's not that deep necessarily, but it's a fun song. But you take other songs. I mean, I mentioned "Fell on Black Days." I mean, that's digging deep into the well of emotion and thought, where, you know, I don't know if you always get that kind of depth. So I do want to mention 2 songs off of King Animal that I think are. We were talking about things that are important to us, and I want to at least mention both of them, because I think both of them. I didn't really pay a lot of attention to them until I actually started listening to the lyrics and reading the lyrics as part of this. And one of those is Tari, which in many ways is a poetic longing for a home that is no longer home. And my experience of going from Maine to Alabama, back to Maine, my return to Maine very much felt like that I returned home, but I didn't return to home. So for people that are in that kind of position, I think that song would resonate. The other one is Rowing.
Wait, what are they? What are they?
Tari and Rowing. Rowing is just, you gotta, as somebody who kind of follows a little bit Taoist philosophy, it very well matches with the way I think of life. We're all paddling down the river, and you know, you have the opportunities you can make, but you have to put in the effort to paddle to the position you want to be in the river to get through everything. Those 2 songs, I think, depending on your state of mind and where you're at in your life, can be kind of indicative of, or help you see that somebody else is going through this kind of same mental complications. So I just wanted to highlight those 2. I thought with additional listening, I thought both of those were interesting, particular to me. Whether or not they have broader appeal, I don't know, but at least for me, they kind of stuck with me. And I know we hadn't mentioned it as of yet. So
I really like the song off of Blow Up the Outside, Zero Chance. It's relatable for people that struggle with issues with mental health.
I think we're going to have a lot of stuff that's going to be on our playlist. It's going to resonate different with different people.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's definitely something that hopefully somebody will get something out of.
Yeah.
Well, and you were bringing up Zero Chance. You look at like Suicide. You look at my God, there's so many depression related, suicidal ideation music. I mean, to be honest, when he committed suicide, that was not a surprise for me based on what his music. You know, you listen to some artists and you're like, oh, well, that was surprising. I didn't think that. With him, that doesn't surprise me. It's kind of like we had talked previously about Linkin Park and Chester Bennington. And if you actually listen to the lyrics for a lot of the stuff that he was involved in, that's not surprising there either. Like, there's a lot of telltale signs, and the way the world reacted to it, with the exception of it, seemed to be a lot of people kind of expected it or weren't necessarily surprised. Saddened, but not necessarily surprised. I may be wrong on that, and that may be, you know, the perspective of my environment, but
it seemed also to me like when Soundgarden had like called it quits, and he really his solo career kind of took off, you know, after Audio Slave. Remember he did the song for the James Bond movie.
Yes.
And so he really got kind of cleaned up and polished, if you remember. And so I guess the public got used to seeing that version for so long that when he came back with Soundgarden, you know, I don't think that that's a knock though on him, because he did really well with, with what, he was navigating. I think he was really good at like being able to put his own stamp on things. He did a version of Whole Lot of Love with Santana, and he was doing the vocals. Oh my God, it was insane. It was blistering, you know. So I mean, yeah, just the hearing of him like passing and everything, you know, it was like really kind of like, oh,
that sucks. That,
you know,
yeah,
that garbage song, you know.
Yeah, I think he did touch on something that the sound of Chris Cornell had evolved so much in the public perspective that when King Animal came out, that's probably a reason that it was not a bigger album. It was a big deal when it came out, and then it just kind of fizzled real quick. I think that's probably because of the change of sound of what people were expecting.
If you think about it, they kind of gave them the Disney treatment. They gave them the Marvel movie. Remember they had that song for the Marvel movie? What was it, the Avengers movie? I think it was like The Been Away Too Long was on like one of the Marvel movie soundtracks. Like they're gonna roll out the big red carpet for them.
Yeah.
And I guess it didn't really hit with everybody else. And you know, people are like, oh, I heard the new Soundgarden, it wasn't that great. I'm like, no, I think it was just fine. I just think like you know, it just really felt like they were really trying to cash in on the band, you know.
I was having a conversation with somebody about a different band, and we were talking about a new album that the band put out. And I mean, I'm a fan of the band, and I think all the stuff they've done has been good. But when it came to the new album, I was like, it was a little subpar. And the problem is it was subpar compared to their other works. The thing that I had to quantify that with is the album itself is still really good. It's just there's nothing in there that sticks out as like, oh my God, this is awesome. You know, that conceptual idea. I mean, whether you like Spoon Man or not, or Fell on Black Days, those songs stick out there. Like you're playing the album and you hit them and the tempo changes. And there are just some songs that do that on albums. You know, Teen Spirit on Nevermind does that. It all of a sudden hits you in the face, and you know it's the peak of the album. Jeremy for Pearl Jam, it does that on 10. Now the rest of the album is really good, but you know you've hit like that song. And with King Animal, and I'd even say to some extent with even Audioslave, there are songs that kind of stick out, but King Animal, there really isn't one that I would say that just whacks you across the face and goes, wake up. And that doesn't mean it's a bad album. It just means, you know, you have something that in days gone by, you might throw the disc on and just listen to it and enjoy it for what it is, instead of going and looking for an emotional ride or the heart beating faster, or the mind getting involved into it deeply. The funny thing is, by doing this, by preparing for this, I did get deep into the lyrics. I did get deep into the music, and I have a much better appreciation for the album. And I think it's a much better album than I had originally attributed it when I first got it. So it's an album I would recommend to people now at this point in time to experience. That there's quite a bit of fun and enjoyable musical taste in there. And it is much more refined than, say, Bad Motorfinger or anything that precedes that. But what do you expect out of guys who are in their 40s? I mean, you're not going to get the...
that's your 2 cents on King Animal?
Yeah. Yep.
Cool. Interesting.
I think it was more than 2 cents, but yeah, I think I gave you the full $1.50. I don't know how to do less than that.
Potato, potato, tomato, tomato. Anyway, I think out of all those 4 bands that came out, as far as like that was when they were termed that whole grunge thing, I think out of those 4 bands, 2 of them still resonate with me, and the other 2, not so much. And I'm just saying, with me personally, if other people are into these bands, that's great. I'm just saying, with me, it's just didn't really have like a lot of staying power with me. And this is shocking, but like Pearl Jam, the first record was okay, but it's kind of like listening to Enter Sandman by Metallica. It's like, okay, I listened to it once. I don't need to listen to it now for like a few years.
Overplayed.
Yeah, just excessively overplayed. And that's not a knock on the musicians. I mean, they deserve, obviously, what they got, Nirvana, my first exposure with Nirvana, of course, was like everybody else, Smells Like Teen Spirit, but I was more of a fan of Come As You Are. And even that was, it's kind of hit and miss, a lot of their music. But the 2 bands I really liked was Alice in Chains and obviously Soundgarden. Because those 2, Soundgarden had just like, they had like all like the right, all the right ingredients. They're kind of like a perfect storm kind of a band. Because I remember they did really well with their Super Unknown album, and that's when it just seemed like they got even, bigger, with Black Hole Sun. Because I remember they were all over CNN, and I was like, wow, I haven't really seen this since Metallica's Black Album.
They latched on to Seattle being the next big thing. So how much was never found? How much were we never fed? Everything had to be Seattle at that time. That was the way that the industry was pushing it to have that next big thing. Alice in Chains, Soundgarden, probably the 2 darkest out of that big 4, if you want to call it the big 4 of grunge. Probably the more staying power over the years. Definitely, Pearl Jam seemed to be, they peaked with their debut being 10. Stone Temple Pilots stayed around for a little bit, but seemed to be less grunge.
I think
there were other attempts
death
to
of
run
lead
another
singers.
city. Yeah.
Death of lead singers
had
affected
other
three of those bands. So
yeah. I mean, if you look at it, there were attempts to try and latch on to other cities for grunge. But they just never really, they didn't have that staying power. They didn't stick with them.
Well, and if you look at it, the punk scene changed because then you got into things like Offspring.
Yes.
Like that, it's so more of like a California punk.
And Green Day.
Yeah, and so I mean, the scene did change. What ended up happening is, as you were saying, they went looking for different cities and they went and grabbed different things. And I mean, you get into Offspring or Green Day, and then you turn from, or Smash Mouth and stuff like that, and then you flip over and you start getting into the new metal feel at the late 90s, the tail end of the 90s, early 2000s. And so the things changed. I think part of the reason we probably have all latched onto Soundgarden, I was a latecomer to Alice in Chains, and I do think they were way better retrospectively than I gave them credit for originally, and I listen to them more now than I did ever back in the day. But I think the reason we latched onto them as a group, each of us individually, is because our roots are back in that heavy metal, and they tended towards the more heavier metal, where Nirvana was more into the punk end of it, and Pearl Jam was more of like the extension of The Who and Led Zeppelin and that kind of popish arena rock. But I would actually say Nirvana's Nevermind is probably the worst of the intro albums to grunge. Like, it was the gateway, but kind of like my opinion on Anthrax. Anthrax is important to heavy metal, but I don't think that they are the best of them. I think they were important for being that transition. I think Nirvana was the same thing, that they were important for that transition, but I don't necessarily think that, that may be just because I'm not into that punk style that they were playing. I think Soundgarden's Bad Motorfinger or even Super Unknown, I think Pearl Jam's 10 and Versus and Alice in Chains, my brain's failing on their first album. All those all the way through are solid. What was that?
Facelift.
Thank you. All those are solid albums all the way through and have depth. There may be a song that's off here and there, which I think Nevermind actually has more songs off than it does on. But you kind of can't. They were the gatekeepers. They were the people who opened the gates and let everybody in. But dude, there's so much we could dig into this.
Yeah,
and it's as much Soundgarden as it is grunge, as well as the music industry and everything else. This was a incredible topic for the day. So
yeah. Okay, so folks, here's what we're gonna do. I'm gonna include a link to our playlist which is available on Spotify. You can find that if you search my username at Squid Adrift. You will see that there is a Soundgarden playlist of tracks that we've picked to kind of spotlight on certain stuff that we like when it pertains to Soundgarden. So we'll include that in the links. You can follow us on Blue Sky, Instagram, Facebook at Wacky Studios.
Don't forget Substack, because this will be posted out there too.
AntWackyStudios.substack.com. Am I leaving anything out, guys?
I don't know. We're trying to put our fingers in everything, and
yeah,
it's a muddy mess at this point.
At this. So please pardon our mess as we attempt to progress here. But
hey, I'd say we're at Louder Than Love right now. We're not quite Bad Motorfinger. We haven't quite figured our scene out.
Let us know what you think about our opinions. Like I said, send all your hate to Ryan and Pump, and they will address those accordingly.
Hell no. Send me the love. Let Pump and D handle the hate.
All right. From all of us